Alright, dealing with roots of negative numbers and negative exponents and exponents with zero. When you are dealing with negative roots, the number outside represents how many times you're multiplying the number. If this number is odd, you know that well, it has to be to get a negative number in here. And normally to find the cube root of 27, you have to multiply 3 by something by 3 times to get 27. In this case, it's 3. Well, the only way we can get a negative 27 out of that is if we have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So when you're dealing with the negative roots, you're basically just finding the cube root and then the negative version. So same thing here. What multiplied by itself 3 times would equal negative 343. We know it's going to be a negative number. I would find a square root or cube root table online to memorize it. Otherwise, you're just randomly having to figure it out. And then what times itself 3 times would equal 343, and that would be 7. So 7 times 7 times 7 is 343. Since it's a negative, we know that the term has to be negative. When we're talking about negative exponents, these you do the same way that you would do a normal exponent. 5 squared, or 5 to the second, would be 25. Because it's a negative number, you flip it and it's a reciprocal. So it's 1 over 25. Whatever the negative square root is, I can say 3 to the negative third. I would just do 3 to the third, which is 27. And I'd flip it so it'd be 1 over 27 since it was negative 3. Which makes it confusing when you get to these where it has the negative exponent on the bottom of a fraction. So we would have 1 on the top, and then on the bottom we have the same thing over here. So it would look like that, which doesn't make sense. The easier way of doing it is just flipping this to the top. So the answer to this one would just be 25. So if you have the negative exponent on the bottom, it just becomes the reciprocal, which would be 25 over 1. And when it was not a fraction ahead of time, it was 1 over 25. So these are the two that get really confusing because it's easy to remember to flip the negative square root here, but when you get to ones that have a fraction, it's difficult to remember, all right, if I'm already making it a fraction, how do I get it back to there? Just think of it as flipping it back if it's on the bottom like that. 0 is the exponent. Everything to the 0 power is 1. So we would just get a 0, a 1 as the answer there, and then x to the third, y to the second, x negative square, negative 2, and negative 1. When we are doing it with variables, remember we are just adding the numbers together. So x has a positive 3 here and a negative 2 here. 3 minus 2 is just 1, so we'd be left with just x. Y has a positive 2 and a negative 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So our answer for this one, simplified, would just be xy. So that's how you do negative bases and